Howdy, folks. Today we're exploring the fascinating intersection of photography and artificial intelligence. How is AI reshaping creativity, headshots, and the photography business? Well, we're uncovering how to blend reality with technology to create stunning, innovative imagery right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, your insider's guide to photography and videography, delivering exclusive insights to keep you ahead of the curve. We've spent literally hundreds of hours chatting with some of the world's leading photographers, bringing you knowledge and techniques you won't find anywhere else. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Nuts. And if you enjoy free podcasts and YouTube content like I do, you can support the show by buying us a coffee over at buymeacoffee.com/camera shake. Your support helps us keep creating more exciting content. But of course, no pressure. We appreciate you either way. Now, without further ado, let's give it up for today's special guest, renowned headshot photographer, AI innovator, and educator, joining us all the way from Canada, the incredible Rafal Wegiel. Rafal, how's it going?
Good, good. Thank you for invitation. I'm always happy to chat with you. As we discussed before we jump on the podcast about 2 years ago or something. So a lot of things changed since then. But I'm excited to talk about AI today, about headset photography. That's kind of hot topic right now. So I'm really looking forward to chat with you about this.
So a couple of years ago, last time you were on the show, we talked about headshot photography, portraiture, and so on. And since then, of course, the world has changed. The AI is everywhere. AI does everything. It's crept into virtually almost every part of our lives, including, of course, photography and imagery. Um, what was the what was the sort of the catalyst that got you interested in AI in the first place?
Um, so you know, so that was a little bit of a longer process for me because, as you probably know, there were tools before, or like they already, quite some time on the market, like Mid Journey. People are exploring that stuff. I tried to do that about I think a couple years ago, but I didn't feel it. It was kind of cool. Like I've seen some creations, but I wasn't kind of convinced. Okay, this is something for me. So I kind of stay away from it for a while. And I think the biggest transformation was for me when Photoshop actually introduced generative fill. So that was the first kind of um, that was the time where I got really interested to kind of explore this a little bit more. But the main thing, what I was trying to do is like how I can implement that into my headshot photography. So, at the beginning, was a little bit of testing and trying and see what I can do with this. At the beginning, the generative fill was not as good. There's a lot of flaws. Things didn't work well. But I could use that to kind of replace backgrounds for my headshots. And that was something that I was just like really inspired because backgrounds for me was something that I always loved, right? Like, trying new backdrops, creating something which gives those headshots something even more, give them interesting look, interesting feel, interesting vibe. And I started exploring this and I was just blown away what we were able to do with this, right? So that was my kind of first step into using AI. The next one was definitely speeding up the process of retouching. And there's a bunch of companies which approach me and say, hey, do we have these AI tools which, help with speeding up the process of retouching. At the beginning, again, I was extremely skeptic because, as every photographer, we have own ways to do things. And then as soon as something new kind of comes into your box tool, and then you're kind of like, okay, I gotta just see how I can use it. But again, I was surprised, how quickly you can start retouching images because I spent a lot of time retouching my images. It took me sometimes hours and hours, and whenever I had like a massive project, then I could spend days or even weeks to retouch those images. So with that new tools, where the results were, very very good. I was just like, wow, you know what? This is unbelievable that now I have way more time on my hands because, instead spending weeks, I could do it within a couple hours. All those tasks, which took me, as I said, days, that was pretty much something which also sold me on, using AI. And the last step, which I would say come up recently, was when the Chat GPT introduced the new image generator, and I started like really heavily playing with it and see what we are able to do. And the results were absolutely stunning. And I was just like, okay, I gotta, dive deep on all these things and then see where this whole thing takes me. I feel a little bit like I remember when film was replaced by digital cameras. I know a lot of people say this is not the same, but that's the way I feel it, that, there's new era of, photography or image creation where we have those powerful tools which, we can utilize, we can use it, we can use them to create, specific images, something interesting. And that's what really inspires me. And I know there's like a lot of people against it. We can probably gonna have a deeper discussion on this today. But at this point, I'm trying to explore it. I'm trying to learn it. I can see how I can make this work, because it's a completely different process than photography. We had a little bit of discussion before where we talk about it. We can also dive into this whole thing on much deeper level. But I think, yeah, we entering again another era, which gonna allows us to, push the creativity, push the ideas, push certain things, specific directions. And I think it's really fascinating time. So I'm looking forward to it, and I'm gonna try to learn as much as I can because there's a lot of new things which are incredibly interesting, and I don't want to kind of waste my time of just kind of avoiding it. I want to just dive right into it and see where it's going to take me.
Before we get into this, there's, ethical discussions of,
Yes.
whether it's right or wrong, or, or what it actually is. Is it still photography now? Because these are the kind of, the debates that I hear all the time. It's like, oh, this isn't photography because, it has AI elements in it, or whatever. But before we get into that, um, I'm interested, first of all, in the sort of technical application. Um,
Hmm.
let's have a chat about your AI generated backgrounds, because as a headshot photographer, when I first saw you do that, I thought, well, this is amazing, because actually what it means is it just gives you a lot more flexibility, especially when it comes to corporate headshots, for example, where you have a client and they have a particular need. And now you can create different options, and of course you could now think, well, you know, I could charge extra for that, for example, for a variety of different
Absolutely.
options. So this, you could actually use this, to your benefit purely from a business perspective. How did you what was your process, to create um AI generated backgrounds for your headshots?
So again, when Photoshop introduced generative fill, that was kind of the first step where I started kind of playing with it a little bit, right? And again, that was the first step where, as I said, backdrops for me was always extremely important. And I always, I don't want to say struggle with it, but that was something that I always kind of have that push, right? Like I want my images to look different. I want to create some different backdrops. But so there's a lot of limitations with that because buying backdrops was extremely expensive, right? If you want to have variety of different ones. Shooting with, bunch of different backdrops during the one session also was extremely sometimes challenging because you have to change that. It was a time consuming, Then I started creating some creative ones, which, sometimes you have to build this entire set to create this specific image.
And this is I remember this because I learned a lot from your videos. Actually, at the time, I remember there was tinfoil involved and other things.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
all sorts of different materials, items, whatever was reflective, whatever, could give me some different feel, different kind of visual effect I was going after. But I'm not gonna lie, I spent tons of money. That was extremely time consuming. And some people didn't like it, right? There is some stuff which looks visually great, but client would never pay for it, right? So that was sometimes challenging because photographers like to see it because it gives you some different feel to the image, but not necessarily the clients, right? So I still explore those because I thought, okay, what I can do to make this whole thing more interesting. But it was on my own dime where, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. I put a lot of time, effort, money into it. And as I said, it was always like, big guess if this is gonna work or not. So I always was fascinated with background. So when this AI element came to Photoshop, I was like, wait, can I use that, right? How can I implement that into my headshots? And that was, again, was a moment where just like, oh my God, this is something we can really push in different directions. We can create those specific backdrops for specific professions. You can play with colors, patterns, ideas, concepts. There's sky was the limit. And that's what I got really fascinated. So there's a lot of things which I want to kind of, because there's a lot of to break down. So at the beginning when I started playing with those backgrounds, like I liked everything because it was new, different, whatever. And with the time, I've noticed that, okay, you know what, this is too much. People saying to me like, oh, those are like, too busy. And then, those are not good. There's like, some distracting elements. So I was just trying to absorb what people say and how to feel about them. I didn't take anything personally because, there's a lot of also like at the beginning, negative feedback, why are you doing this? This is not looking good. People prefer this and not, the same with what we have with AI right now, right? And there's a lot of resistance. But with the time, I found people started kind of like getting a little bit more open up to it. But I also noticed I have changed. So my eye become a little bit more detail oriented, and I was just paying attention to a lot of those little things and those backgrounds. They were getting better and better and better, to the point where I could really kind of see what works, what doesn't work, and I can also push all sorts of different directions. So that was kind of the first kind of step, and I know a lot of people picked that up, and then a lot of people kind of start using those digital backdrops. Even they creating their own. I have also some for sale where people buying it. I just create this entire community where people share all those ideas. I started teaching how to do them because there's a lot of little things which you have to learn how to make this whole thing work. And yeah, I got amazing feedback from people. And then, now I think there's a lot of other even AI retouching companies which absorb this idea that, you can remove the background, you can put something creative. But I think that the biggest thing, and you pointed this out as well, we can really, take advantage of this financially, right? So, if you have a client and they want to have some, I don't know, regular background, gray, white, black, whatever, we can always kind of, introduce those digital ones. And then, even till today, whenever I'm shooting a headshot, I always kind of like, hey, you know what? I have this sets of different backgrounds we can use for your images, or if you really want to look, if you want to have something very unique and something special, I can also create just, backgrounds just for you, right? So we can make this very, very personal. We can, kind of talk about details, what direction you want to go, what kind of image you're going after, and then we can, create those specific backgrounds just for your image. So that was, something also with becoming this additional offer for the clients, which makes those images more unique, more, a little bit more different, and people like that, right? Till today, I'm doing this, and there's a lot of positive feedback from it, and I know people love it because everyone wants to be unique and different, and they want to have some image which really represents them. So those kind of new tools allows us to do that. And I think, yeah, again, something that cut the cost. So I know there's a lot of companies, and it was interesting for me because I got a lot of again hate from companies which were doing just the actual backgrounds for portraits and headshots, that they started kind of going after me like, why are you promoting this? This is not fair. And I get it, like if you running business which can replace you by, this digital creations, of course it's scary, right?
One of the reasons why I don't time limit my sessions really is so that I can go through different setups, different backdrops, different lighting setups, and what that does is it creates variety, and that variety is the thing that turns into an upsell. Um, and that's basically where the value of that session comes in, because this is the I remember when I first changed my business in that direction, the criticism I used to get, or the questions I used to get was like, oh, well, how can you not time limit your sessions? So now, how's that going to translate into value? Well, because I can create more, a greater variety of imagery, and the client, 100% in my experience, you know, is gonna basically buy more images if there's a greater variety of images there, and of course you do the standard white, the gray, the black, blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. Um, but if you can offer, in addition to that, a number of digital backgrounds, basically, then of course your chance of actually monetizing that session more lucratively, in a sense, is so much higher. So this would be an occasion where actually this could come in really quite handy, for your business, as such.
Absolutely, 100%. And then, like, as I said, you're not limited to the same backgrounds. You offering something, as I said, different and unique for each client. It's also interesting for me that sometimes I had these clients who they like, oh, I don't want any digital backgrounds, like I want to just gray one. And I always like, because it doesn't take much time. It just takes, matter of seconds. And if you know how to prompt it properly and what the clients like, what the professions they are in, and you show them, and it's like, oh yeah, that actually looks really cool. And then, just changing their perspective. And then, I found also a lot of clients, they use their regular great background, typical corporate headshots for their, I don't know, the business page. But as soon as they jump on, social media or places where they want to have some a little bit more unique look, they always turn into those digital backgrounds once, right?
It's
Always.
that's
So
exactly the thing. I mean, I don't. I can't even count anymore the amount of times that I had people, come in and go like, "Well, I just want a white background, keep it simple, or gray or something." And then whenever I said like, "Okay, well, let's do something a little bit more, a little darker, a little bit more dramatic," I'll guarantee you that they fall in love with that image at the end of the session, and they'll definitely then, buy some of those images 100% every time. I've never had a session where somebody goes like, "I don't like the dark, moody, dramatic look." That always goes. I mean, to the point where now I very often just skip all the other stuff and I go straight to that because I know that it virtually every time, it's an option that people like, and again, so but how do you like when you create digital backdrops? Do you shoot initially specifically on medium gray in order to extract out, or is there anything you do during the shooting process that makes it easier to replace the backdrop with a digital backdrop afterwards?
So nowadays, the AI got so good that you don't really have to kind of go with any specific type of background to separate your, you know, subject from the background. AI is pretty good to kind of recognize the subject and kind of create this decent selection. The one thing what I always recommend to people is, create this kind of highlights which gonna clearly separate the subject from the background, because it's going to be much easier for AI to kind of recognize where's the subject, where's the background. But even if you not do that, then like it's something that AI is pretty good these days. So there's a couple of things what I want to actually just maybe kind of step back and then just kind of give a little bit more, I would say, kind of different perspective on this. So when it comes to creating those digital backgrounds, the one thing what I always pointed out, you have to start with the good image, right? Because I think there's a lot of people think that, oh, if even if I shoot crappy image, I can I can use AI to make it pretty. It's not gonna work. I can tell you, when it comes to my experience, you have to have good image. So those skills of doing proper good headshots, it still stays. And you shouldn't kind of like, oh, just doing sloppy job, and then hopefully that AI is going to fix everything. The better image you starting with, the AI only kind of can be used to enhance those images to kind of look better. So that's the first step. The separation, this is another thing. You can shoot anywhere as long as there's clear separation between your subject and in your background. Then AI is going to have pretty kind of easy job to do to separate it and kind of remove the background. And lastly, what I want to say, AI is not perfect, when it comes to, especially the Photoshop one, when it comes to fixing certain things like ears, and then, like hands is still, has a lot of problems. It's gonna pick up, I think, with the time, but it's not there yet. So that's something which also people have to kind of understand. Also, AI is not really good, the Photoshop one, especially to manipulating any parts of human face. Like if you start kind of playing with mouth or lips or eyes or whatever, it's not going to good job. So that's something it's still kind of developing, and I think eventually it's going to catch up and going to do the good job. But when it comes to backgrounds, it's really good.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. I tell you what I did the other day. It's I used Photoshop, to build in generative fill, build in Photoshop
Yep.
AI to get rid of reflection in glasses.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to sort of go through a few rounds of generate, you obviously make the selection, and you have to go through a few rounds of generating. But I know, for some very bizarre reason, this is across a number of images, I found that on the second round, the middle image, because it gives you three options. For some reason, the second round of generating the middle image tended to be the best one, and I don't know why that was, but and yeah, absolutely, it got rid of the reflection. It basically filled the space in with a really realistic render of what would be underneath, and it took hardly any time at all. And
Yeah.
so
Well, that's the beauty of this, right? I 100% agree that you can fix things which back in the days would take hours to manage. Now you can just, like, and you don't even have to be precise. You can just circle the area which you don't like, and then like, you don't even have to prompt it. Sometimes you just like, okay, let's the AI analyze it, whatever the hell is on the image, and it's gonna do a pretty decent job. But yeah, I agree with you when you said about running you know few rounds of trying to let's say fix certain things, because I've noticed there's a lot of photographers who using generative fill, and that they do this, like, try to do something, like even with the background. Sometimes they prompt it and they're not going to get the results, and like, okay, this is crap, this is not working. So in my case, sometimes I go for, let's say, 10, 20, even 30 rounds of creating specific backgrounds till I get something interesting, because it's not spitting out all the time some fantastic results. So that's a little bit of kind of tip for photographers. If you're going that route and you're trying to kind of use it, give up because the AI didn't give you the results right away. Try it again. Try it again. I don't know. Change the selection. Change the prompt. Just give the AI a little bit of room to play with it, and then you will definitely see at some point good results. And at the same time, the one thing also what I want to point it out is that eh, when it comes to even creating those backgrounds, you can definitely, use AI to fix things, because this is one of the things what I've learned. Like I got, let's say, background which I partially like. So, there's some parts which I like it, but there's some which I don't like it, right? And I usually delete those because, okay, yeah, this is not working. But now, knowing that we can use AI to fix AI mistakes or flaws, you can just like literally, circle the area and like, fix it. You know, and then it's gonna, analyze the image, and it's gonna pretty much give you the results you're looking for. So yeah, but again, this is the learning process, and this is the something which also took me months sometimes, because I was just like, having this kind of idea how I should work with AI, and I was just like, okay, this is not working, this is bad. But then I was just like, okay, at some point, keep getting this kind of like moment, like, okay, why don't I like, use AI to fix some of those problems, which the AI created and actually worked, right? And again, you don't have to prompt it, you don't have to give specific, I don't know, wording, whatever. That's what I like about generative fill, that in many cases, you really don't have to even prompt it, right? You can just circle the area and the AI will analyze it, the image, and yeah, pretty much will do the job. And there's one more thing what I want to point it out, because I think that's going to be valuable for a lot of those folks who are listening to this podcast, and they trying to create some digital backdrops. Don't give AI some very specific prompts, because I've noticed, like, if you start using very, very specific words, AI will start really focusing on those. And what I've learned to get better results, use much more general words. So for example, like if you say red color, every background is going to be red. But if you say tonality, the AI will start playing with different colors, right? So you have to be, again, more general. Instead saying, I don't know, lines, or I don't know, bokeh, or any of these type of very specific words, you can use words such as pattern or symmetry, and the AI will start implementing elements which have symmetry or have patterns, right? So you giving the AI a little bit more room to play with to create something interesting. And I found the results were way better, way better. And then you can see it right away, that, being more specific in this particular case is not a good idea, right?
That's super interesting because intuitively you would think, okay, we need to be super precise so we can get the AI to do exactly what we have in our mind's eye. But actually, just by keeping it a little bit more vague, we're just, in a weird way, we're giving the artificial intelligence more room to be creative. Now that's weird.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like I've talked to actually a company which I started actually working with. So what they do, they have this AI model where, you can upload your selfies, and the AI creates professional looking headshots, right? So I know this is like the biggest fear of people who are shooting headshots, that, like now we're gonna have AI applications which can do that for us. And it was interesting because I invite the owner of this company to my podcast, and he was just like, "Are you sure you want to talk to me?" Because, like, we're getting so much backlash from photographers, and he was terrified that I'm gonna just like crucify him, online, talking about it. I'm like, you know what? No, I'm trying to understand what you guys doing, because this is the path, right? Like, it's a bunch of different companies which do the same thing what you guys doing, but I want to understand the process. So he jumped on, actually on the podcast, and then we have an interesting conversation how they actually train this model, how they do this whole thing, and what they strive with. So it was fascinating conversation, and they actually invited me to join their team, and they're like, you know what, would you be interested to work with us? I'm like, sure, why not? Like it's I want to learn this stuff from the other end, right? But the one thing what he told me, one of the biggest struggles they had was, pretty much the face expressions. That's something that the AI cannot really get the grasp, and then, get the grip, and then, they've been fighting with this for months and months, and then, whatever data they put it in, it doesn't get it right. But one of the things also what he said to me, which was fascinating, that the AI is so, like, I don't want to say amazing in the terms of Like, okay, so what he was trying to say is that if AI doesn't have an answer or doesn't know how to do certain things, it's gonna fill up the gap on its own, right? So they say, like, sometimes hit the jackpot, sometimes it's a total miss. But he's told me, like, we've noticed that AI, whatever there's a kind of room where it doesn't know what to do, it's gonna do it anyway, right? Doesn't matter it's good or bad, but it's gonna fill up the gap on its own, which was kind of also interesting how this technology works.
Yeah, it's basically going to lie to you at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, pretty much.
Unbelievable.
But human eye is pretty good when it comes to kind of recognizing what it's fake, what it's real. I think now the line is blurred, right? I think whenever I work with Chat GPT or other AI AI models who create images, I think now it passed that kind of goalpost where people can kind of recognize if this is real or not. Like, I know there's a kind of weird concept, and yes, but creating emotions,
Yeah.
it's completely different story.
Yeah, that's a weird thing about it. I know, I noticed that you sometimes with ChatGPT in particular, you have to tell it very specifically to either reference previous chats that you've had with it, which it can do, in order for it to not just make something up, but pull information out from somewhere, from a conversation that you had previously,
Mhm.
you know, uh,
Absolutely.
and so it could, um, oh yeah, and for example, so one of the things, just to give you an example, like one of the things that I would do is, I would not typically what I'll do is I take an episode of the podcast and then I extract sections of it and I basically release them as standalone clips, which is a normal thing you do. And of course, because it's quite a lot of work, I basically use AI to analyze the content of this particular clip, and then I basically say, well, I can now create a title for this particular clip. Okay. And then what I've noticed early on was that sometimes the titles don't actually really represent what's being talked about in this particular clip. And so I'm thinking, well, this is weird. It's just made that title up because it thinks it's, I don't know, click worthy or something, right? That's bizarre. So I have to specifically prompt it and tell it, create a title based on the actual content of this clip. And then it does it, It's just like, okay, well, that title, so you just made that up. you know?
Yeah. I think, that's gonna be the biggest, I don't wanna say challenge, but something that we're gonna have to learn is to communicating properly with AI. I know it's gonna
And
get
that's
better, right?
yeah, but that's the key.
But
Yeah,
this is
absolutely.
this is what this is what I've learned, even with, creating those images right now with ChatGPT. Like, so generative fill backgrounds is a, completely, I would say, open space where you can just give AI just a general kind of ideas what you're going after and just let the AI kind of play with it, and the results you like, you can kind of use it. But Chat GPT, on the other hand, is completely opposite. Like, you have to be very precise, and even sometimes, one word can change everything. That's what I've learned, right? Like, creating those images. And but then again, you can just use it and refine it throughout the process, to kind of get the results you're looking for. But sometimes, for some of those images which I already created, the prompts were like very extended. Like, I was going for like the little detail I could find to make this image look the way I wanted. uh, which again, we've talked about it. This is completely different process of creating those images, but having the ability to kind of pinpoint certain elements and say, hey, this is what I want to change and make this better or adjust this, or I don't know, just, I don't know, do this way. It's fascinating process of creating those shots, because AI is not gonna just, like, I don't know, spit something what doesn't look good. It's gonna kind of improve it and it's gonna look better. So you can really go not only any direction you want to go, but also, you can, the process, like, if, I think when people go to my blog, I'm gonna actually, I have one blog post where I'm showing the process where, where is the starting point image, the just the regular prompt which I've created, and then the process of how I actually improve the image through refining the prompt. And, you have the first image and the last one is like a day and night, right? So it's like, a little bit like a photography. I know people gonna just kind of crucify me for this, but the same thing. When you work with clients, you working with lighting, you try to find specific posing, face expressions, and you just throughout this process getting into this image which you're looking for. And the same thing is when it comes to working with prompts. You're starting with just a regular idea, and then you just refine it throughout the process. You adding elements, you see the image. Okay, this is good. This is bad. Remove this. Add this. Okay, now I don't like this. Let's kind of completely switch and go different direction. So sometimes, as I said, it takes me hours and hours and hours go through this prompt and generating those results till the point where I'm satisfied with the final image. And, also kind of similar scenario, which I had with the backgrounds, that at the beginning I liked everything. And now I'm very picky, and, I see what I like and I see what I don't like. And, I've noticed it takes me more time to get where I want to go with those backgrounds. And exactly the same kind of process I see working with ChatGPT, that at the beginning I liked every image ChatGPT kind of spit out. And now I'm actually getting into this kind of place where I'm becoming very, very precise and specific. And then, like it takes a lot of time to get to this kind of point where, I'm kind of satisfied and I like the image itself.
And what you've just described is actually just a perfect description of the creative process, just in general. Because, and I give two examples. Lighting is a really good example. Actually, general, photographic studio lighting or off camera flash, if you want to call it that. When you first get into lighting, and you maybe get your first strobe, and your first softbox or a speed light and a softbox something, and you take a picture and you look at that and you go, whoa, that's amazing, oh my god, that's incredible. And then you get into it, and of course, you over time, you start to craft the image, you start to get more specific about the position of your light, the angle, the height, the intensity, maybe even the color. Then you add additional lights. And now you're starting to craft that image. And every time you go through that process, because obviously every face is different and every person is different, and you have maybe a different goal in mind, you go through this process of, doing something, evaluating it, going, I like this, or I don't like that, or maybe what if I just try this? You take another shot, you compare it, you go, oh, actually, no, I'll go back to this. This is a typical creative process. The same exact thing is true for music, right? When
Mhm.
you first start learning guitar and you learn chords and you start maybe writing your own music, you put 2 chords together and you go, "Whoa, this is amazing. This is cool. Perfect." And I actually, this is my own personal experience. When I was a kid, that's exactly what I did. I had I had a book, and, I fancied myself as a songwriter when I was literally when I was just starting to play the guitar. So I was like 7 or something, right? And I had this book, and I remember I used to write down song number 1, and it was E minor to G, because those were the 2 chords that I had learned by this point, and I figured that these 2 chords sound really good together. Awesome. And then song 2 was E minor, G, and D, because now I'd learned another chord, a D chord or something. Um, and of course, 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, I'm in a studio and I'm crafting music, and, you go through lots of choices and you try things and you make, sometimes you let your intuition take over, or your instinct. Sometimes that, say, a guitar solo or something, you might just give it a chance and actually just allow you to be free and not be held back by too much planning, but just maybe just let it roll for a bit, and then, and so you become a lot more discerning, but also a lot more precise in a way, in the way that you achieve your end result. And of course, your end result is going to be much more complex, but, much better in many ways compared to when you started. Same thing in lighting. You end up with images that are a lot more craft. I mean, now when I go through a port, like not necessarily a headshot session, but when I go through a portrait session, sometimes I create these images. that God knows how many lights. Some are like bouncing into walls, some are bouncing into reflectors because I want to brighten these shadows a bit. It's a process that can maybe take a long time, but I can tune the image to exactly where I want it to be. Now, what you just described with prompting and reprompting and changing the prompt and and developing that image is the exact same process. It's just a different medium and a different tool. So I completely recognize the creative process in that. So to me, there's virtually no difference between that and and sculpting a portrait or writing a piece of music or editing a video. It's the same thing. It's
Mm,
exactly the same thing.
absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
so it's I find that the more we get into AI, the more people do with it because AI is a relatively new phenomenon. This is the other thing.
Mhm.
It hasn't been around for the last 25 years. It's only been around.
No.
I mean, it's only been around for a couple of years. It's really unbelievable
But yeah.
how quickly it has. In fact, when DALI, I think it was DALI 2 or something, the first of, I don't know, publicly available version or something first came out. I remember we covered this on this podcast. This is how recent this was, you know.
Mhm.
And between then and then, I don't know, when Photoshop brought out generative fill, I made a video about that. I turned a lumberjack image into a pirate shot, and it was terrible. you know, because that's where generative fill was at the time. And now we've gotten to the point where, and this is one of the things I've noticed about your work, you know, where you're able to create not only AI generated backgrounds, but these incredible visual pieces of art using AI that I find amazingly stunning. You've got one thing we sort of talked a little bit about just before we went live on the show. You did a series called One Planet, One People, which I found really stunning. Describe a little bit what that was about.
So, you know, as we speak, like, this is something completely new to me, right? Like, this whole new image generator created by ChatGPT was released, I don't know, like month ago, like was really fairly new. Um, and I've been playing with different ideas. And as I said, like, it was something that you throwing some kind of concept and then you just kind of go with it, like, you've been surfing or something. That's the way I feel it sometimes. And like I was always fascinated with, spaceships, Star Wars, all this stuff. And yeah, and this kind of idea came to my mind, like, why don't I just create images of astronauts, right? So that was the kind of the first step into this. So I was getting some interesting results, and then I've shared that idea with you. And at the same time, when I was creating this, I was just listening to some news, and they were talking about the war and then all this crazy stuff which are happening in our world. And that's just like kind of hit me, like, what? Why don't I just start kind of like showcasing and just kind of using specific countries and kind of try to unite them. That we all kind of living in the same planet, and then kind of doing living kind of in one place, where we all kind of connected, and then we really don't need all this wars and conflicts and all this stuff. And that's how this halving was the next kind of step of this entire idea. So yeah, I was just kind of playing with all these countries which are kind of in some kind of conflicts right now, and started kind of like implementing specific looks for the subject, and just kind of basically showcasing them that with specific flags and then the names and stuff like that. Yeah, so that's how this whole thing born. And then the last image which I've kind of asked AI to create it, because I had this like prompt which was generating this specific look. Yeah, I come up with with this kind of idea that the last image of the series is going to be a person. And also what I can specifically said, like, try to mix all the nations and all the races in one kind of person, right? And I know AI was just like kind of like I see what's kind of struggling with this a little bit, And then one of those elements I want to put it in is like, instead having a flag, have a, planet Earth as a kind of logo of that final image. And that's how this whole thing kind of, came to existence. And yeah, and it was kind of interesting that as we also spoke a little bit about it, that those ideas are shaping out throughout the process, right? So you're starting with one concept, and then you're just going with some directions, and then you get some inf- influence from, I don't know, the news or the world or you name it. And can kind of, and you can implement it right away. You can kind of put it in, and the AI will help you to kind of go that direction, which I think this is something amazing, that the sky is the limit with this, right? You can really push it any direction you like, any kind of crazy idea you have in your mind, you can kind of put it in life. And that's is one of the things which fascinates me about this process of creating images, that we reach the kind of point in our kind of life, or I don't know, creativity, where any idea can be put in a life, right? There's no boundaries, there's no limits, there's no kind of financial boundaries that if you cannot go to the Arctic, or you cannot go to the moon, or you cannot go to the Mars, whatever. Like literally anything is possible. And that's what is fascinating me about this entire new tools, that we can really explore our imagination to the levels we were not able to do that before. Because again, we spoke about a little bit. Photography is fantastic, and I'm gonna love photography because this is how my whole career looked like. And I'm not trying to diminish. I highly respect every photographer, and whatever they do. But I think, again, we reached the level not right now, or the times where we can really start creating images or the ideas we had, which were impossible to do before. And that's what it's fascinating for me, and that's what I'm trying to explore.
Is an interesting thing, really. And I often think it's in the past, some very often the defining factor for some people's work was simply access. The fact that people had access to a certain place, a certain medium, a certain technique or certain tools that allowed them to do something that was different from what a lot of other people did. Um, and that's what outwardly made them become known and respected and so on and so forth. The danger in that is that you end up doing it for you end up doing it for other people, and for the way that other people regard you, in a sense. So it's the one thing I think personally is that with a tool of AI, where as you said, it doesn't really matter whether you're now in the Arctic. You know what I'm saying? I'm using this as a great example because I've literally just
Mm,
been to the
yeah.
Arctic a few
uh,
weeks ago. Um,
Okay.
and I did a lot of photography there as well. So it comes in. It makes perfect sense for me to talk about that. Now, yeah, you can create an image of the Arctic without even having been there, because you can use AI tools to do that, and that's all well and good. Um, however, you know, for me personally, and I'm sure a lot of people will share that, for me to actually go to that place and put myself into that scenario, into that environment, and create those images, that's important for me because it's part of my process. And I wonder whether, with the emergence of AI, we're going to get to the place where maybe people will start to value that process a little bit more. In the same way that people are shooting film now again for some reason, or listen to vinyls, which for a long time were completely dead. I mean, 15 years ago, a lot of people was a film. I mean, come on, man, it's all digital now. Why would you go through all this film bit, developing and like, like now it's like, oh, okay, I like the process. I just love the way that it's so slow, and I just love the whole process, and that's why I love doing it. Again, case in point here. Uh, it focuses you on the process, and it makes it a valuable thing for yourself rather than for the rest of it. Because actually, you know, I could I could create very, very similar images, just using my digital camera and a bunch of, film, simulations. Absolutely no problem. I could easily do that digitally and create the same look that I get from HP5 black and white, blah, blah, blah film. Um, but I don't wanna do that because that's not the process. That's not the thing that I like about it. I like the process of getting there, you know? And I wonder whether, with the emergence of technologies like AI, it would give us a chance, at least, possibly, to really kind of look inwards and discover the joy in the process for us. You know, um, whether that process is going out with a film camera and shooting film, or whether it is putting yourself into weird situations, and creating photography, or whether in fact it is to create art on the computer and using technological tools like AI to create that art. Um, and so I think the difference, hopefully, well, I'm hoping that the joy will come out of the process rather than just and only the end result.
So you know what? Okay, so first of all, I 100% agree with you when it comes to, photography gives us specific experiences. And as you said, going to Arctic and taking images there, nothing, there's not going to be replaced. You cannot replace that with AI, right? Because it's completely different experience. You're going there, traveling, being there, experiencing the environment, everything. It's a completely different experience. And I'm going to be honest, I 100% agree with you that you cannot replace that with AI and creating those images through AI process. The same thing when it comes to creating portraits. I deeply believe that connecting with people and working with them, being present, finding the best sites, finding the best poses, finding the best lighting, it's a process which cannot be replaced by AI. And just because I do that, when it comes to creating those images, I still shoot portraits. I still work with companies. I still do all this stuff. Um, and as I said, like nothing's gonna replace that. Um, the AI, I think it's a new technology which allows us to kind of go beyond. Let's say someone cannot go to the Arctic. Someone cannot, I don't know, have access to the specific people and specific lighting or specific equipment or specific gear. Now they also able to create something which I don't know has some meaning for them, or they want to be creative, or they want to do something which I don't know they are proud that okay, I've done this. Also, I think AI can be really good when it comes to testing ideas, right? Let's say I want to create a specific
Yes,
portrait. Let's kind of come up with some mood boards and then kind of
exactly.
ask AI, "Hey, you know what, let's kind of come up with this concept, see how I can kind of do it." Because a few days ago I actually was interesting, I was playing with some portraits when I was just creating them through AI, where there's a, let's say, kids or adults wearing outfits made out of vegetables and fruits and stuff. I don't know, I just have this kind of weird idea, just to kind of for the sake, what I can get. And what was interesting, some of those vegetables and fruits work really, really good. And I could kind of pull it off if I could kind of get access to all this, amount of this kind of specific fruit would look really good. And there's some of them which looks horrible, right? So you can really kind of play with the idea prior to photo shoot and see, okay, this is might work, this is might not work, this is how we can improve it, how I can. So I think also AI could be some kind of like a tool for us to test things before we kind of get to actual photo shoot, right? But yeah, I agree with you. Like the process itself is something that cannot be replaced by AI. And then like I'm again, I'm not trying to say okay, you should drop everything, and sell your equipment, sell your lighting, just go full AI and create those images. Um, I'm against that because I think that we're living also in the world where we are completely disconnected from each other. The human connections becoming very, very kind of, I don't know, different nowadays, and getting into, kind of connecting with people becoming more and more difficult. Speaking also on that, I did this interesting blog post and also like a little reel about um, dating world, where people just kind of create their own world to showcase who they are when it comes to finding like a partner, or I don't know, love in their life, through AI apps, right, where they kind of crafting how they look, how they behave, who they are, and all this stuff. And it's almost 90% it's fake. We all know that, right? So imagery is extremely powerful, right? But also I think we abuse it a little bit, because like, I'm going to kind of drift off a little bit of our topic, but I had this interesting discussion the other day about photography in general, because people say like, oh, this is what you do, it's bad because it's AI created. But let's be honest, like when you look at even our photography, we retouch the images, we color grade, we crop it, we use specific lenses, we use specific lighting, we use AI to do all sorts of different adjustments to give the image specific feel, specific look. So are those images really kind of real? Because if you look at so many of those photographers who, okay, this is the raw image and this is the final product, looks completely different. And we do that
Yeah.
for years. It's not something that we, okay, oh, this is AI who just kind of destroying everything. We use retouching for years now, and we completely
Yeah.
reshape people and do all sorts of manipulation to bring these images to kind of specific level of how we feel about it, how the person looks. We remove things, we make people thinner, with color grading, with skin, removing on the pimples. We just completely remove all the reality from those images, right? So it's not
Absolutely.
something new. I think the AI is the next step, where we just like now can really shape it to this like the last piece of image, so it looks extremely altered, and kind of like created to this very, very specifics that we want this image to look like, right? So I think we are in this process for a very long time. Now we have reached the point where we kind of have the next level. What do we can do with those images?
Yeah, it's not even. It's not just even retouching. It's also just simply light and shadow. You just need to look at George Orwell's portraiture work. Very dark shadows. We hide things in the shadows. We highlight things in the highlights. We reshape faces by the way we just use highlights and shadows. It doesn't even have to go as far as retouching. Even
Mhm.
photography is a way of creating a it's like a hyper real world almost, where we show people what we want to show them and we hide from them what we want to hide from them. Whether that is, imperfections in the skin, or whether that is, through shadow and the highlight, or whether it's through AI. It doesn't really matter. The principle is exactly the same. And like you said, I 100% agree. AI is just another tool to do that. I know, and people are going to listen to this, and people are allowed to have a completely different opinion. That's absolutely totally fine. And of course, there's circumstances where it does matter. Like competitions, for example, or something like that. There are circumstances, without a doubt, and there is need for rules and and whatever. But it's it was possible to do that when Photoshop came around. It's possible to do it now. It's I'm not really necessarily that terribly concerned about that. But it's exact. I 100% agree with you. Um, in your personal work, when it comes to using AI tools, do you have a limit, or do you draw the line somewhere? What is your sort of, or do you have sort of a line in the back of your mind where you go like, well, I'm going to go this far and no further?
So okay, so first of all, what I want to say, I am, or I'm, do everything what I can to be extremely transparent with those shots. So I'm not like saying, oh, those are real images, I shot them or whatever, right? Like, as you see, like every image which I'm putting out has this AI little emblem on the top that, I'm honest, this is AI, this is not real, this is fake person, this is not something that I created through photography. It's it's straight AI. I did that for prompting and kind of different type of manipulation to get to this final shot, right? So that's the first thing. When it comes to kind of my original work, as we spoke a little bit, the only thing what I do when it comes to my headshots is implementing the backgrounds. So that's I don't do any other crazy stuff. I have insane requests sometimes. Just speaking of that, how people also from because I hear a lot of criticism from people like, oh, we want to just see people, we want to just see real, kind of I don't know, like real subject, because this is what you do. It's fake. These people don't even exist. But then when you look at it, those people who are actually our subject, they're coming to you and they say like, make me skinnier, like, 20 pounds or, clean my face or, fix my teeth and, make my eyes brighter. They ask you, oh, replace my clothing nowadays. It's a big one, right? I had people who came to me for a photo shoot and they wearing t-shirts and then they're like, oh, can you put me in a suit or beautiful dress and all this stuff. I know you can do that. So it's kind of fascinating for me that from one hand people pushing towards this reality, but from the other hand, when it comes to me and you shooting me, I want to have this image altered to this freaking edge because I want to look stunning. I want to look like a supermodel. I want to look like like I'm just the perfect from every angle. So that's kind of like interesting for me, how we navigate for this, depends, how they look at this whole thing, right? If this is for me, I want to be perfect. But when you're using fake people, all of a sudden you're the bad person, right? Um, so when it comes to also using AI, like at this point, what I'm trying to do is explore the ideas which I had in my mind for many, many years, and I could never photograph them, because there is limits, right? We talk about it, financial limit, location limits, kind of concept limits. There's, the list goes on and on and on. And I know I wouldn't be able to do those images. Um, so yeah, so this is what I'm doing right now is exploring, what the AI can do, and how far I can push it. I know there's no boundaries at this point. This is what I've learned because every crazy idea I had, I was able to kind of bring it to life. And also I know that my brain is kind of, I don't know how I can say it. I know it's going to maybe sound a little bit bizarre, but now I started really thinking differently because now I can really take any of those crazy ideas and then, as I said, bring it to life. So now I'm trying to think about those different concepts, how I can make this even more unrealistic or something that kind of breaks all those rules and breaks all this limitations we have even on this planet, like even when I did this concept with those astronauts, right? Like who would be able to do this a few years ago, getting access. Actually, the funny story, I actually had this photo shoot with Canadian astronauts, and that was like I think 4 years ago. And she said to me that, oh, maybe one day you can kind of photograph me in my astronaut like the whatever I don't want to say costume, it's like what it's
Oh,
called,
the spacesuit?
the spacesuit, yes.
Yeah.
And she said that, it costs about $150,000 or something, like this insane amount of numbers. And even for them to get access to it, it's impossible. They whatever, they have a mission or something, they can get access to it, but it's just something that they cannot even touch because it's it's expensive, is specifically designed for them. It's not like they can come in and take it out and then put it on and take pictures, right? It's a much more complex process. um but also I think we can use AI to really expand our thinking and creativity and ideas and concepts. This was not possible before because we could all use our imagination, and we have this interesting conversation before we jump on the podcast about Star Wars, and we talk a little bit about Avatar, that people have this crazy ideas, crazy concepts which they would like to bring to life, right? And then if that wouldn't be something that I don't know, it's not interesting. Like, let's talk about Avatar. I can remember James Cameron said, like, I had this idea about this movie, but I was not able to create this because I didn't have tools. I didn't have kind of ways of doing this. I had to have specific equipment, a specific, I don't know, like the AI generators, you name it, to bring this to life. But then, this film was created, this idea, and look, was a hit. People watch this till today and I love it. I go to this freaking movie like every few months because it's just every time you see something different, something new. So I think the same with the AI, and this is what we do. I think the difference is right now that every person can do that, right? You can be going online, and I'm not saying you're going to monetize from this. You can just create this stuff for yourself. Again, we had this conversation about, and I know I'm just jumping all over the place, but we have a discussion about my son who came from school the other day, and like he was quite upset, and I just kind of jump on chat gpt, and I kind of come up with this idea like what images I could create to make him laugh. And the AI started kind of like spitting out some images of different animals with this funny poses and interesting kind of like features on their faces, and making funny faces. And I show him this stuff, and he just like you start laughing, and then like all of a sudden he's in a good mood, and it was just bunch of images, right? So I think if we kind of look at this AI creation, we can use those stuff to do some positive things where we can, I don't know, uplift people, we can motivate them, we can inspire them, we can bring some ideas to life, and then inspire them. Because as I said, like it's a process. So maybe my ideas, the stuff what I'm creating, maybe inspire somebody else, and like, okay, you know what, I love those images, maybe I can do something different. So we just kind of expanding the way of creativity, of way we think, we look at the world. I did another series about the war, which also, we're living in this freaking crazy times where, we have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. Looking at the current state of, what's happening in the Middle East and then the United States, and, like all over the world, economy crisis, the tariff crisis. I don't want to go political, but what I'm trying to say, maybe we can use those images to kind of make people, I don't know, pause for a second and think about, our world, how we can be better people, how we can, I don't know, inspire others, how we can help each other. And this is my goal. Like, this is what I want to use AI. I want to use those imageries to inspire people. I don't know, bring some issues to the world, to kind of, I don't know, as I said, take a pause and think about, what the hell's going on in our world, and, how we can be better people. And that's the way I look at it. It's not, I'm trying to harm people, or I don't know, just like, create some additional, I don't know, tension, or, do things which harm people. This is not my intention. And I know people look at it different way. But if someone calls me on, you doing something that is harming people, I'm gonna stop right away. There's no question about it. But I'm trying to kind of use those images and those ideas, those concepts more to inspire people rather than harm them.
And that's really, I think that's where the art of it really comes in, because art very often has a message. And I've just recently been to the National Gallery here in London. Um, and you look at a lot of the art, and a lot of those images have, there are messages that tell you something, and that message might be a positive message, might be a message of pain, it might be a historical, whatever the message is. But a lot of the time, when you pay attention to a lot of those paintings, you really, you start to read it like a newspaper almost. And I think
Yeah.
that's the really interesting thing about it is the message, and the concept. And that's really where the human influence comes into it. Is to think of a concept, and think of a message that you're wanting to communicate, and then using artistic tools, of which AI is one. And actually, I'm just going to link this to something you said earlier. And this is really something I have a little bugbear with that, a lot of time. Um, this is this idea that for some reason you can only be one thing or do one thing, and therefore you cannot do another thing. And if you switch to doing another thing, you have to completely abandon the thing that you've been doing so far. And I know this from my own speaking from my own experience, having had a career in the music industry and then switching to photography, you wouldn't believe how many people were in complete disbelief. They just couldn't, just couldn't wrap their head around it. How is that even possible? Like, how can you're a musician, you're Kate, a musician, how, well, and it's like, yeah, I mean, I still love music. I still like to play the guitar, but I also
Mm.
love photography. It's not
Yeah, exactly.
it's not one thing or the other. It's one thing and the other. And and next week, if I discover something else that I fall in love with, something that's artistic to some degree, for me personally, not a problem. I can shoot film and digital. I can use Photoshop or not use Photoshop, and and therefore, you to me personally, using AI as yet another tool, in order to, communicate that creativity in your head with the world, it's a no-brainer to me personally, but everybody's got their.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. And I think, it's the message we are sending, I think, through this images or through music, through different types of arts. That's what it's important, right? Like, because I don't care if you're painting or you're photographing or using AI, but you're sending this positive message and you inspire people. That's what it's matter. I'm gonna kind of share another, like, a little story, which I actually was thinking about it yesterday when and then you kind of bring that back to my mind right now. So, I was always a big fan of World Press Photo. I know, probably heard about it. This is like, major, photography exhibition. And like, it's always, I've been big fan of it. They picking one of the top, images from, like I don't know, the last year. And those exhibition always had huge impact on me, right? Because you see this, wars and cruelty of the world, the disaster, like, you name it, right? And then like, like, looking at those images, they left huge impact on your psyche and your emotional kind of level. But the one thing what kind of is interesting for me, like, you see this kind of, I don't know, let's say images from war, and let's say they're like, someone killed, or some drastic shots. From one hand, it's kind of, interesting to see something like this because it's going to leave huge impact on you. But at the same time, like, I wouldn't, like, my perspective, from one hand, I wouldn't want these people to go for this just so I can see it and have an impact on me, right? Because someone died, someone lost, and we just see, like, the image, but we have no idea how much this whole thing left behind, the destruction, like, how people grieving and sacrificing and, living in poverty and all this stuff, right? Um, so, maybe, and again, I don't know, this is just maybe weird idea, like, why don't we use images which are fake, leave that impact and make us better, instead seeing those shots where, actually impact people. Why don't we make this world better where, people don't have to go for this, kind of struggle and wars and poverty and all this stuff. And then we can kind of create this impact on ourselves different way, right? So this is just, I know this is the kind of thought, but I also think, how we can use maybe AI images to really change the way we look at the world. And I know, again, they're fake and they're not real, but still they're gonna leave the impact. They're gonna leave some emotional kind of um baggage on us, so maybe we can be better people, right? Again, this could also comes into, global warming, right? We see those disastrous images, right? Do I want to see them? I would rather, living in this kind of world where, this whole thing is fixed up, and then we're living in a healthy environment, and, we work on making things better, and then, you know, don't kind of like getting impacted by those images who are, like, showing how disastrous this world is, right? And I know sometimes we have to see it, but, at the same time, like, I would rather to use AI to make this world better and don't kind of get influenced by those images. I know I'm just running circles right now with this, but the way I look at it is, how, having the ability to create images which could create this positive emotional impact on people. And doesn't matter they're real or fake. I think with the fake ones, at least we know nobody gets hurt or nobody died or anybody has to go for this, kind of disaster in their lives, and just make us think about, what possibility there is, that could happen, and, make the change, and, just kind of be proactive, whatever, just for using those images. I don't know if that makes sense,
The funny thing is, if you took everything that you've just said and you replaced the term AI with the word art, nobody would ever disagree. You know,
Yes.
that's the thing. Um, what advice would you give photographers who are maybe hesitant, about integrating AI into their work?
You know what? I think my advice would be just try it. Don't kind of hate this because it's something against what you've been doing for the last 20 years. Um, and I've been always trying to be open-minded, and if there is new tool, new kind of concept, new something, I can create something, I'll try it. As I said, as long as I'm not harming anybody or I'm not doing something destructive, I'll test it. So before you start, jumping on people who actually using it and trying it and see what this thing is doing for them and how they can kind of utilize it, just test it and then to play with it and see, how you can. If this is something for you, right? Because again, photography is not for everybody. The same, it's not painting for everybody. There's some people who love it, some people who hate it, and they would never do it. But as we spoke, this is a process, right? The end results is a one thing, but the process itself, that what is the most interesting part. Um, so yeah, my advice would be just try it out, and see how you feel about it. If makes you feel better, or you can create something which inspires you or make you feel better, go for it. If you feel okay, this is not for me, and just leave it. And by all means, I again, I respect photographers, and I think that, this is what I've been doing for the last 25 years. So it's not like, I'm abandoning photography and I say it's bad. It's fascinating. I live with it. I breathe with photography every single day. uh Different is right now we have some new tools which I want to try it, and that's what I'm doing. And also what I think, another like little piece of advice I would like to give to people is, just don't try to kind of, I don't know, just fight everybody who is doing or trying AI tools, because AI is here, it's not going away, it's part of our life, and I think we should maybe, I don't know, collaborate together and then learn from each other and just kind of exchange, I don't know, ideas, concepts. Even if you don't agree with me, I don't mind have a discussion. There's no problem with that. We can talk about it. We can, share what you agree with, what you don't agree, how we can kind of, I don't know, find the middle ground to make work for everybody. But I had people who, just hate me, like the stuff what I'm getting sometimes, it's just absolutely insane. And then you can see there's anger, there's rage, there's, people who completely, I'm not saying lost their mind, but they so pissed that, you cannot even have an open discussion with them, right? And I know we're living in also a world where, a lot of those people feel that the AI might take their jobs and, just kind of diminish their business and all that. And I get that part. And I'm on the same boat, like I'm kind of still, shooting headshots. My main income comes from photography. So AI, it's not something, like, and then a lot of people are like, oh, you're shooting yourself in the food and don't promote it and all. But, if I'm not going to do it, somebody else will, right? So it's not like, they're going to shut one person and then I'm going to just stop this and then somebody else going to like, oh, I'm not going to do it. There are people. So I think it's better to jump on this boat, see what we can do with this, and how we can kind of collectively kind of learn something from it, and use it the way that it's going to benefit all of us.
Rafal, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show this week. I'm sure it's not going to be the last time because this is a wicked carry on with this conversation for
Oh
the
yeah,
next
forever.
2 hours. But um,
Yes. Absolutely.
Rafael, it's been an absolute
But
pleasure.
thank
Thank you
you
so much.
for inviting me and open in being open up to having that conversation because I think that's extremely important. And this conversation should be ongoing. And it doesn't matter on which side of the kind of story you are. Yeah, let's talk about it because maybe I'm wrong about some stuff, right? But if someone has strong argument and tell me, hey, you know what, this is the wrong way you're doing things, I'm open to listen to these people and kind of adjust to whatever is right for sure.
All right, folks, that's a wrap. What an insightful conversation with Rafael, diving deep into AI, creativity, and the future of photography. Well, truly inspiring stuff. But before we wrap up, make sure to check out another episode you'll absolutely love. Episode 253, featuring fine art photography with Anya Anti. Definitely worth a listen. Absolutely fantastic episode. If you're enjoying our content, consider supporting us over on buymeacoffee.com/camerashake. Your generosity truly means the world and helps us continue creating awesome episodes for you. And for those listening to the audio podcast, did you know there's a fully fledged video version packed with examples of our guests' incredible photography? Just head over to YouTube, search for Camerashake Podcast, and you can watch every episode there. If you're already watching on YouTube, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and hit the bell. It helps us reach more photography enthusiasts all over the world. Thank you so much for tuning in. And remember, new episodes drop every Thursday, so set your reminders. Until next time, keep shaking things up in the world of photography. See you next Thursday.